She accidentally sees the Alpha King in the changing room during cleanup. Her life changes forever. The palace of Urindor stood like a shadow against the blood-red sky, its towers clawing at the clouds as though trying to pierce the heavens themselves. Within its walls, light and dark twisted together, casting long, narrow shadows down endless corridors. The air carried a chill, not from the wind but from the weight of secrets. Few dared to enter these halls, and fewer still dared to look beyond what they were meant to see. Lyria moved quietly along the polished stone floors, her simple tunic brushing against her knees as she carried a bucket of water and a worn rag. She had cleaned these halls for as long as she could remember, invisible in the grand palace where kings and queens made history. Her life was quiet, ordinary, and safe, or so she had always believed. The castle was unusually empty that afternoon. The servants had been sent away for a royal event, and only Lyria remained to prepare the chambers for the evening. She hummed softly, the sound swallowed by the high, vaulted ceilings. Her footsteps echoed in rhythm with her heart, a gentle reminder that she belonged to these walls, yet did not belong to them. As she scrubbed the floors outside the royal changing rooms, a sudden noise made her pause. A faint click, almost imperceptible, came from the slightly ajar door of the king's private chamber. She had been told never to enter, never to look, and never to disturb the Alpha King under any circumstances. But curiosity, that small spark of danger, flickered in her chest. For a moment she froze. Something in the air felt different, heavy with a presence she could not name. The door creaked again, and Lyria, almost without thinking, pushed it open just enough to peek inside. There, standing in the center of the room, was the Alpha King. He was nothing like she had imagined. The fearsome tales told by the servants spoke of a man unyielding, untouchable, almost monstrous in his power. But the man before her was human, framed by strength. Yes, yet unguarded, vulnerable in a way that seemed forbidden. His armor lay in a neat pile at the side, and the mask that concealed his face during court hours rested against the wall. Their eyes met. Lyria's breath caught in her throat. The king's gaze was sharp, and yet it did not burn with anger. It was as though he had known she would be there, as though he had been waiting all along. She wanted to step back, to close the door, to pretend nothing had happened, but her legs refused to obey. I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely more than a thread. The king did not move. He only observed her with an intensity that made her heart hammer against her ribs. There was no rage in his eyes, only something deeper, something that both terrified and fascinated her. And then, in a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the connection shattered. Lyria stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of the rug, and fled from the room without looking back. She ran until her lungs burned, the echo of her own heartbeat louder than the soft music of the palace fountains outside. Back in her small quarters, she sank to the floor, trembling. Her hands shook as she tried to calm her racing thoughts. What had she seen? Why had he looked at her as if he already knew her name, her thoughts, her fears? She tried to tell herself it was just imagination, just a trick of the mind. But deep down, she knew it was not. Something had changed. That night, sleep came in uneasy waves. Shadows twisted across her walls, and in the corners of her mind, she saw his face, framed by candlelight. His eyes haunted her dreams, neither cruel nor kind, but filled with an intensity that left her breathless. She awoke before dawn, heart still racing, feeling as though the world outside had grown colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. The next morning, the palace felt different. Lyria moved cautiously through the halls, avoiding the king's chambers, yet sensing a presence she could not place. Whispers among the other servants were unusual, subtle glances exchanged where there had never been glances before. Something had shifted in the air. She could feel it, a pull that tugged at the edges of her life, drawing her toward a destiny she did not yet understand. It was during her afternoon chores that she noticed it, a small golden token lying on the floor near the main hall. It was embossed with the royal sigil, a mark reserved only for objects the king himself touched. She bent down, heart hammering, and picked it up. The metal was warm to her fingers as though it carried life within it. There was no note, no explanation, only the weight of intention. Fear and fascination warred within her. The token was a summons, she realized. She did not yet know where or why, but she knew one thing clearly: her life would never be ordinary again. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lyria wandered through the palace gardens, hoping the night air would soothe her mind. The roses were blackened at the edges, twisted by the magic that lingered in Urindor, yet their scent was intoxicating, a blend of danger and beauty. She thought of the king, of the look in his eyes, and her heart ached with longing she did not yet understand. She was so lost in thought that she did not hear the quiet steps approaching from the shadows. A hand touched her shoulder, light but commanding. She jumped, spinning around, and there he was, the king, fully armored now, yet still carrying the weight of something otherworldly in his presence. "You saw me," he said, his voice low, like the rumble of distant thunder. It was not an accusation. It was a statement. Lyria swallowed hard. "I didn't mean You cannot take back what has been seen," he interrupted softly, yet every word struck like iron. "The bond is formed now, whether you wish it or not." Her eyes widened and a chill ran down her spine. She wanted to deny it, to run, to escape back into the safety of her mundane life. But the king's gaze held her in place. She could not look away. The palace, the gardens, the blackened roses, all faded into the edges of her vision. Only him remained. "You are tied to me now," he continued. "And though the laws of the kingdom forbid it, fate has already begun its work." Lyria's heart raced. Tie me? I don't understand." He stepped closer, yet there was no threat in the movement, only inevitability. "Seeing me as I am, without armor, without mask, it changes everything. It awakens a connection older than the palace, older than the crown." She felt a strange warmth in her chest, a dangerous, thrilling pull toward him. What will happen?" "That," he said, his eyes glinting like storm clouds over distant mountains, "depends on you." Before she could respond, he turned and vanished into the shadows of the garden, leaving her alone with the token in her hand and a heart that beat faster than she had ever known. The world felt heavier, darker, yet somehow alive in a way it had never been. That night, Lyria lay awake again, the token clasped tightly in her fist. The king's words echoed in her mind, mingling with the image of his gaze. She felt fear, yes, but also something else, something undeniable, something that whispered of destiny, of change, of a life far beyond the walls she had cleaned for so many years. And in the farthest corners of the palace, where shadows moved of their own will and magic lingered in the stones, a presence watched. The Alpha King, bound by duty, curse, and something even he did not fully understand, waited. The bond had been formed, and neither of them could escape the future it promised. The first threads of a story neither of them chose, yet both were now woven into, had begun. Cliffhanger. As Lyria drifted into a restless sleep, a faint golden light glimmered beneath her door. The token pulsed once, twice, and then vanished, leaving her with a single, impossible thought. She was no longer alone in the palace. The morning sun barely touched the towers of Urindor as Lyria awoke, the events of the previous day still swirling in her mind. The golden token had vanished as mysteriously as it appeared, leaving her with an uneasy feeling that she could not shake. She dressed quickly in her simple clothes, trying to pretend that nothing had changed, though deep inside she knew the king's presence lingered like a shadow she could not escape. The palace seemed quieter than usual. Even the usual servants were whispering behind closed doors, their eyes darting toward her as if they sensed something she did not. Lyria's heart thumped as she realized what was happening. She was no longer invisible. Her life, which had been safe and ordinary, was now woven into a tapestry that belonged to the king himself. Her chores led her near the king's chambers again, and instinctively she stopped. A strange warmth spread across her chest, a mixture of fear and curiosity. She knew she should avoid the room, but some invisible thread pulled her closer, as if destiny itself had begun to speak. Without warning, a soft voice broke the stillness. "You do not run any more, Lyria." She turned sharply. There he stood, the Alpha King, fully armored now, yet with a presence that seemed heavier than the steel he wore. His eyes, dark and commanding, met hers. There was no anger, no accusation, only a calm intensity that rooted her to the spot. You spoke," she stammered, unsure whether she should bow, apologize, or flee. "I always speak to those who are bound to me," he said, stepping closer. "And you are bound now, whether you understand it or not." Lyria swallowed, trying to steady herself. "Bound? I don't understand." He studied her for a long moment. "Seeing me without armor, without mask, it awakened the bond. It is older than the laws of this palace. It cannot be broken by fear or denial. Only by understanding and choice can it grow or fade." Her pulse raced. "Choice? You mean I have a choice?" "Yes," he replied, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "But choice comes with responsibility and danger." The word danger hung in the air like a blade. Lyria felt the weight of it immediately. She was just a cleaner, a girl who had spent her life quietly sweeping floors and dusting shelves. And yet, the king had singled her out, not as a servant, but as someone connected to his fate. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. I don't know if I can," she began, but he raised a hand, stopping her. "You do not need to know yet," he said. "The bond will guide you, but know this, your life as it was is over. The moment you saw me, everything changed." Lyria looked down at her hands. They felt small, weak, ordinary, and yet somehow she sensed that the king was right. Something inside her had shifted, like the first tremor of an earthquake, small but unstoppable. Over the next days, the changes became more noticeable. Shadows seemed to move around her, bending slightly toward her presence. Objects shifted subtly, almost as if the palace itself recognized the connection she now shared with the king. Lyria began to hear whispers, not words exactly, but thoughts carried on the wind, as though the castle were alive and speaking in riddles. And always there was the king. Sometimes he appeared where she least expected him, leaning against a doorway, standing silently in a corridor, or watching from the balcony as if he could see the path she would take before she took it. Lyria's heart ached with a strange mixture of fear and longing. He was terrifying in his power, yet undeniably human in the rare moments he allowed her to glimpse his vulnerability. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, painting the palace in crimson and gold, Lyria wandered into the western gardens. The roses there were twisted and blackened, yet their scent was intoxicating, a mixture of danger and allure. She could hear the faint rustle of leaves behind her, and then a voice, soft, commanding, yet familiar. "You came here on your own," he said. She turned to see the king standing among the shadows, his armor glinting faintly in the dying light. I needed to think," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything is changing so fast." "It always changes, Lyria," he said. "The question is whether you will let it control you, or whether you will control it." She looked into his eyes, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink until it was only the two of them. "Control, it feels impossible," she said honestly. You have so much power. And I'm just me." "You are not just anything," he said, stepping closer. "You are part of something greater now, something older than the throne, older than the walls of this palace. You have the courage to see what others cannot. That is rare. That is powerful." Her chest tightened. She wanted to protest, to say she was unworthy, yet a strange truth settled over her. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps seeing the king without armor, without mask, had awakened something inside both of them. "Why me?" she asked finally. "Why not someone else?" The king's gaze softened, though only slightly. Because you saw me as I am. Most people fear the crown, the power, the mask. You saw the man beneath it. And in seeing him, you began to understand the bond that governs us both. They stood in silence, the palace around them alive with unseen magic. Shadows shifted, the air hummed with the faint pulse of enchantments, and the roses seemed to lean toward them, black petals quivering as if they too recognized the connection between human and king. Then, without warning, a gust of wind swept through the gardens, stronger than natural. The king's eyes widened. "The bond it stirs," he murmured. "Something is awakening." Lyria's heart raced. "Awakening? What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A faint glow rose from the blackened roses, casting eerie light across the garden. Whispers echoed through the air, faint, urgent, and almost sorrowful. Lyria felt her knees weaken as the energy washed over her. She could see visions flickering at the edge of her mind, shadows of the palace collapsing, of corridors twisting impossibly, and of the king standing alone, surrounded by darkness. "It is the curse," the king said, his voice low and steady, though Lyria could hear the strain in it. "The curse that binds my line, it senses the awakening of the bond. It tests us, tries to break what fate has woven." Lyria swallowed, fear and awe clashing in her chest. She wanted to step back, to flee, but she could not. Something inside her anchored her in place, something she did not yet understand. "You must trust yourself," the king said, stepping closer, placing a hand near hers but not touching. "The bond is stronger than the curse if we are willing to face it together. But the trials, they will not wait." A sharp crack echoed through the garden as a gust of wind tore through the blackened roses, scattering petals and whispering in voices only the two of them could hear. Lyria stumbled backward, and the king reached out instinctively, his hand hovering over hers. For a moment the world held its breath, suspended between danger and hope. You are not alone," he said. "I will not let the darkness claim you or me." Lyria looked up into his eyes and felt the weight of his words. She realized then that her life had indeed changed forever. She was no longer the ordinary cleaner she had always believed herself to be. She was bound to the Alpha King by something invisible yet undeniable, and together they faced a force older than the kingdom, older than the crown, older than either of them. And yet, as the last rays of sun dipped below the horizon, a darker truth began to form in the edges of Lyria's mind. The bond was only the beginning. Trials would come, choices would be demanded, and sacrifices would be necessary. The palace itself seemed to whisper warnings in the night wind, carrying the scent of danger, destiny, and a love that could either save them or destroy them. Cliffhanger. That night, as Lyria lay in her small room, a shadow fell across her window. Outside, the golden token had returned, glowing faintly in the moonlight. And in its glow, she saw a fleeting image of the king, trapped within a circle of shadows, reaching toward her. A single thought struck her with chilling clarity. The bond had begun its work, and soon she would have to follow it into the heart of darkness. The palace of Erendor was quiet that night, yet alive with a presence that neither Lyria nor the king could ignore. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the high stone walls, and faint whispers traveled through the corridors like distant echoes of an old magic. Lyria clutched the golden token tightly in her hand, its warm glow pulsing softly, almost like a heartbeat. It had returned to her, guiding her, calling her towards something she could not yet see. Her footsteps echoed through the gardens, blackened roses trembling beneath her careful touch. She could feel the bond with the king stronger than ever. It was no longer just a spark of curiosity or fear. It had become a tether, invisible yet unbreakable, pulling her toward him. She did not know why she obeyed the pull, yet she could not resist it. From the shadows the king appeared, his armor glinting faintly in the silver moonlight. He did not speak at first. Instead, he watched her, and in his gaze, Lyria saw something she had never expected: vulnerability. The man behind the crown was not untouchable, not invincible, but burdened, weighed down by centuries of duty, loneliness, and the dark curse that had haunted his line for generations. "You came," he said finally, his voice a low rumble that seemed to stir the night air. I had to," Lyria replied softly. I felt the bond, I could not ignore it." The king stepped closer, and for a moment the night itself seemed to hold its breath. "You are brave," he said, almost as if testing the words before releasing them. "Braver than any who have walked these halls before you, and yet bravery alone will not save us." "I don't care about saving myself," she said, her voice trembling yet steady. "I care about helping you, about helping us." A flicker of something softened in his eyes, something that had never been there before. Hope, perhaps even trust. The king, whose life had been defined by control and fear, found himself drawn to this ordinary human who had dared to see him without armor, without mask, without fear. "Then you must understand," he said slowly. "The curse that binds my bloodline is older than this kingdom. It does not forgive. It does not yield. It seeks to destroy what should not exist. And yet, in seeing you and letting you see me, something has shifted, but it is fragile, and it is dangerous." Lyria felt a chill run down her spine, yet she did not step back. "I will face it," she said simply. "Whatever comes, I will face it with you." The king studied her for a long moment, and then, with a movement swift and graceful as a shadow, he extended his hand. "Then come," he said. "The curse will test us. And you must walk into it willingly, not as a servant, but as a partner, as someone who chooses to stand beside me." With trembling fingers, Lyria took his hand. The instant their skin met, a surge of energy pulsed between them. Shadows around the garden swirled violently, as if the night itself had taken notice. Whispered voices rose, some mourning, some warning, some cheering. Lyria felt her body tremble, not with fear, but with the intensity of the bond, the raw, unseen power flowing through them. The king led her through the palace corridors, faster than the eye could follow, until they reached a chamber that had always been forbidden to her. Ancient runes glowed faintly on the walls, carved deep into stone and etched with magic older than any living memory. In the center of the room was a circle of shimmering light, and within it, shadows twisted like living creatures, clawing at the edges of reality. "This is the heart of the curse," the king said, his voice steady, though his grip on her hand tightened slightly. "It tests all who are bound to it. We must enter together or it will destroy us separately." Lyria nodded, feeling fear, yes, but also a clarity she had never known. She had been swept from a life of quiet cleaning into something far greater, something dangerous, something beautiful. She was no longer ordinary. She was part of a destiny that demanded courage, love, and trust. Together, they stepped into the circle. The shadows surged, pressing against them, whispering secrets and lies, testing their resolve. Lyria felt visions flash in her mind, hallways collapsing, the king surrounded by darkness, herself lost and alone. But she focused on the hand holding hers, on the bond that had tethered them from the moment their eyes first met. "Do not falter," the king whispered. "Trust in the bond." And trust she did. The shadows shrieked and twisted, but the moment their wills aligned, a brilliant light erupted from the circle. The darkness recoiled, retreating into the corners of the chamber like smoke driven by wind. The air trembled and hummed with power, and Lyria felt the bond between her and the king solidify, not as a fragile thread but as a living force, strong and enduring. When the light faded, the chamber was still. The shadows were gone. Lyria's breath came in soft, controlled gasps. The king, though weary, looked at her with something that was no longer simply curiosity or caution, but admiration, respect, and perhaps even affection. "You have done it," he said softly. "The curse is held at bay, for now. But know this, it will always test us, and our bond will always be the shield against it." Lyria let go of his hand, only to see him step closer again. You were incredible," he said quietly. fearless in the face of magic that has destroyed countless others. You saved me. I didn't save you alone, she said, feeling warmth flood her chest. We saved each other. For the first time, the king allowed himself a small smile, one not born of command or power, but of something human, simple, and genuine. Then perhaps the bond is not only our shield. Perhaps it is also hope. Lyria felt her heart stir. Hope. Yes, he said, looking deep into her eyes. Hope that the curse will not define us. Hope that we can choose our own path, even in a world built on shadows, fear, and expectation. Hope, and perhaps more than hope. The words hung between them, heavier than any crown, warmer than any fire. Neither spoke for long moments, only gazing at each other as if seeing for the first time, truly seeing. In that quiet, the palace, the gardens, the blackened roses, and the shadows all faded. There was only the bond, the connection, and the knowledge that they had faced the darkness together. The king took a deep breath. You must know, he said finally, my life has been defined by power, by fear, by expectation. I have known neither trust nor friendship, and certainly not love, but you have changed that. You have awakened something I thought lost to me forever. Lyria's chest tightened. And I have never known someone like you, strong, powerful, and yet so human, so real. For a moment, silence wrapped around them like a cloak. Then the king reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then we face the future together, he said. Whatever comes, whatever trials, whatever curses, we face it as one, and we choose each other always. Lyria's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of understanding and deep, unspoken joy. She nodded. Always, she whispered. Beyond the palace walls, the first rays of dawn stretched across the kingdom, golden and pure. The shadows of the night were gone, though the memory of them lingered in the corners of the mind. But for the first time, Lyria and the king felt the weight of fear lift, replaced by something enduring, something stronger than magic, stronger than curses, stronger than power. The bond between them had been forged in fear and wonder, in shadows and light, and had emerged unbroken. They had faced the darkness, and in doing so discovered the first true spark of hope, trust, and love. Yet even as they stood together, hand in hand, the palace whispered in quiet tones, the winds carrying voices that promised the future would not be easy. Rival kingdoms would watch, magic would stir, and the world outside would challenge them in ways they could not yet imagine. But inside the palace in that moment it did not matter. They had chosen each other. They had faced the darkness. And they had survived, stronger, united, and ready for whatever destiny awaited. The Alpha King and the girl who had accidentally seen him had become more than legend or whispers. They had become a story of courage, trust, and the power of connection that could withstand curses, shadows, and time itself.